Hi everybody. I'm sorry we can't be there. We'd just like to give a short introduction on who we are and what we do in the GBD.
Hi, I'm Jeff. I've been visiting the GVD since I helped out on a fauna survey there back in 1998, and I really just can't get enough of the place. We have a number of projects out in the GVD, which include general fauna surveys, monitoring the sandhill dunnart and a range of other threatened species. We have a bird banding project going with the WA Museum, and recently we've been looking around for the remains of animals that used to live out there to get a better idea of what used to be there.
I'm Jo. I'm a life sciences researcher from the University of Bristol in England, and I've been living and working in WA for the past 5 years. I'm doing my PhD on the sandhill dunnart, and we've both worked closely with conservation groups such as the GVDBT and the GEMG, but most of my field work is actually based out of Tropicana gold mine along the APA gas pipeline.
We've been monitoring the sandhill dunnart in the WA portion of the GVD since 2014, when we first detected the species near Tropicana gold mine.
I've been using spatial ecology and autoecology to study the species. So the main things I really do are radio and GPS tracking, and I'm looking at habitat use and looking at the shelters of sandhill dunnarts, and I'm also doing a diet analysis. And another one of the main parts of the project is maxent modeling. So that's a species distribution program that predicts where these guys are likely to be in Western Australia. And I'm also hopefully going to do some climate change modelling.
We've been researching the impacts of predation and fire on the region's fauna, and recently we've been looking at which species are able to survive in habitat fragments.
So this is what we know about the broad scale distribution of the sandhill dunnart. Populations A and B are now presumed extinct, but we can see up until quite recently that sandhill dunnarts had a much larger range. Three known subpopulations still persist. So that's C, D, and E on the map, and that's Eyre Peninsula, the Yellowbinner Regional Reserve, and the subpopulation we're studying in the Western Australian GBD.
The Sandhill Dunnarts range in Western Australia is the southwestern GVD, extending from Queen Victoria Springs Nature Reserve to Tropicana Gold Mine, with an apparently outlying population northeast of Laverton. We have used motion cameras, pitfall traps, and the analysis of predator scats to confirm the species over approximately 200 kilometres. Motion cameras have been the most effective way to detect the species, although detectability can vary immensely from year to year and from site to site. At some sites we have detected the species on every survey, but then on others we haven't detected the species since 2015. Fire and predation are likely to be significant factors affecting the species presence, and we will discuss these later on. The GVD is a really beautiful place, and it's been described as one of the last wildernesses left on Earth. It's home to a number of threatened species, and in the area where we work, this includes the malleefowl. You can see an active mound on the bottom right, which is about 100 metres from one of our sandhill dunnart monitoring sites. The GVD contains a unique mix of plants and animals, with both species typical of the arid zone and also the temperate southwest.
I think you can see from the photo in the bottom left there that it's not really what you think of when you think of a desert. It's one of the most vegetated deserts on Earth, and it's a very special place in the southwest due to the increased rainfall and the dense vegetation and primary resources.
This is what sandhill dunnart habitat looks like. It's sand plains and dunes with long unburnt vegetation, as this provides the range and abundance of sites required for shelter. Habitat is usually mature spinifex, so out in the GVD it's Triodea desertorum and Triodea basdowii, which often has an overstory of marble gums, mallee and calitris, and also a variable but quite complex shrub layer, which includes grevilleas, hakeas and allocasuarinas, and this develops in the absence of fire. The southern GVD also has a southwest influence, and some of the plants that we find at the sandhill dunnart sites include banksias, and verticordias and leucopogons. This photo is a pretty classic sandhill dunnart site, but as the species can move very widely, it can forage within a range of vegetation types that include mulga, marblegum woodland, and mallee.
Radio and GPS tracking results show that sandhill dunnarts can have very large home ranges and are active from dusk until dawn. So the moving blue triangle in the video is the dunnart, and its location was recorded every 10 minutes initially with the GPS. And then the GPS stayed on for another week, so I got fixes every hour with it from then on. And we can see that he's stayed in the sort of clustered pink area. That's where he likes to forage. Using this data, I can work out what habitats sandhill dunnarts prefer. And this male actually has a 200-hectare home range, so it's incredibly large. It's like a human having a 4,000 square kilometre home range, so that's twice the size of the ACT. We found 198 shelters and on 336 days, so they were reusing shelters and maintaining home ranges. And they preferred to shelter actually on the sand plains, which is interesting, and also the north and south dune foot slopes. And they really didn't like woodland or mulga habitats for shelters. And they also only had 12 shelters on the dune crest, so the last three habitats are quite open and exposed. And we know from recent work by people like McGregor that feral cats actually really like hunting in open habitats. So this is perhaps why. So to look at this in further detail, we analysed the structure surrounding each shelter, and it turned out the lower stratum was very important. So that was significantly denser in sandhill dunnart shelter plots and within random plots. And we can see this particularly clearly with the dune crest data on the right. So when sandhill dunnarts did choose to shelter on the dune crest, they chose areas that were much more dense than was available.
So these are the types of shelters that sandhill dunnarts use. Burrows, which are often under spinifex rings but can be out in the open. Dense hummocks of spinifex, but also softer leaf plants such as Lepidolus and Schoenus, and also hollow logs. Burrows are usually around 30 centimetres deep, but can be much deeper than that. And sandhill dunnarts can also live in burrows constructed by other animals such as goannas, hopping mice, and mulgara.
Burrows were preferred by sandhill dunnarts in our study, and they comprised 3/4 of all of the tracking days. So there's some evidence from Sue Churchill's radio tracking study in 2001 that burrowing may be more common in the GVD, and this might be linked to things like temperature and habitat. And Sue's tracking study is the only other tracking study that we have for sandhill dunnarts, and that sort of suggested a slightly different behaviour for the species on Eyre Peninsula. And again, that might be because of different habitat availability.
We have analysed hundreds of scats from over 40 individual sandhill dunnarts with the help from Brian Hetrick at Curtin Uni. And we've found that sandhill dunnarts are particularly fond of small invertebrates, particularly ants, nocturnal Camponotus or night ants, but also consume a lot of other small prey, including beetles, termites, centipedes, and spiders.
This is our species distribution model that we did with Maxent. It predicts where sandhill dunnarts are likely to be. So blue areas are where they are likely to be. Red circles are known presence records that I inputted into the program. And I also fed the program lots of information with GIS. So things like vegetation, aridity, evaporation, and surface geology. And it came out with some areas of interest that we planned to go and see, and we did last year. And that was sponsored by the GMG. So we looked within the GVD, but we also looked within the Goldfields region. And here's what we found. We got sandhill dunnart on 9 cameras in likely regions, so places that we thought that they would be in, and we also got them in some unusual areas. You can see the new population up near Laverton, and that was recorded on 3 spatially independent cameras last May. Unfortunately, we didn't record the species outside of the GVD, and this confirms that the GVD habitat is critical for sandhill dunnarts. We recorded a lot more foxes outside of the GVD and a lot more dingoes inside the GVD. I'm also going to be modelling the impact of climate change on sandhill dunnarts throughout Australia. There's a lot of press about climate change at the moment, and we know that large fires have been increasing in intensity and frequency over the past 30 years. And even in a best case scenario, the arid interior is likely to become hotter and drier. So the intermittent rainfall band that makes the southwest GVD such a nice habitat is predicted to move south, and that's very concerning for sandhill dunnarts. And we're researching the threat of fire on the species, and we'll talk more about that in a second.
Unfortunately, there has been a pattern of mammal decline in the GVD, and some of this has been quite recent, and evidence of former inhabitants can still be found today. These bones and scats have been found close to Tropicana and include the brush-tailed possum, black-flanked rock wallaby, western quoll, ghost bat, burrowing bettong, lesser stick-nest rat, and long-tailed hopping mouse. The feral cat has been implicated in the decline of many native mammals, as has the changed fire regimes arising from the end of traditional burning practices. The sandhill dunnart is sensitive to both these, predation and fire, and the interaction of both threatens the species' long-term survival in the GVD. Over the course of our research, we have been able to determine that feral cats do predate the sandhill dunnart in the GVD. We have analysed over 100 scats from the feral cat, fox and dingo, and sandhill dunnart remains have been found in feral cat scats and also during radio tracking. The dingo's diet is predominantly macropods, which you can see here. The green bars are highest for kangaroos. However, the feral cat diet and the fox diet is very varied, with the feral cat predating a wide range of native species, including many dunnarts, the brush-tailed mulgara, and southern marsupial mole. Our results have recently been incorporated into a national study, which reveals that the sandhill dunnart is one of the most susceptible Australian native mammals to predation by feral cats. Fire is another significant threat to the sandhill dunnart. Each summer, destructive fires remove large areas of habitat throughout the GVD. In the last decade, sites formerly known to support the sandhill dunnart have been completely transformed by fire, including near Tropicana and Queen Victoria Spring Nature Reserve. One large fire in 2016 burnt 4 of our trapping sites, and despite monitoring, since then the sandhill dunnart has not been recorded in these areas. Most sites supporting the sandhill dunnart are long unburnt and have vegetation 40 years or older. The earliest age of vegetation post-fire at our sandhill dunnart sites is 12 years. Fires can be visible from space, and the picture on the bottom left is of a hot summer fire in January 2019, and you can just make out Tropicana to the right of all that smoke. Unfortunately, this fire burnt 50,000 hectares of habitat, and including an active malleefowl mound. This is a video of fire scars over much of the sandhill dunnart's range since 1984. It's on repeat, but it's showing the fire frequency in the area, and as sandhill dunnarts prefer long unburnt vegetation, these fires are of a higher frequency than the age of vegetation at most of our sandhill dunnart sites. As the sandhill dunnart inhabits shelters associated with mature vegetation, it's likely to take many years after a fire before a site is suitable to again support the species. However, sandhill dunnarts can survive in fragmented landscapes, and fire refuges are likely to be very important for the species' dispersal and post-fire colonisation. In 2017, we recorded a number of dunnarts in small fragments of vegetation that were left behind after a fire. Some of these fragments were as small as 55 hectares, However, they were surrounded by large areas of burnt sandplain that look like the picture on the right. These yellow dots are of individual sandhill dunnart records that were recorded on motion camera placed in vegetation that looked like the bottom right. Part of the way that sandhill dunnarts can survive in fragmented landscapes is that they can cover a lot of ground. Individuals can move over 1 or 2 kilometres to locate shelters within suitable vegetation. This is a map of one single dunnart that regularly moved between 4 shelters that were located within mature vegetation that looked like the picture on the top left. However, these were separated by an expanse of approximately 1 kilometre of recently burnt sandplain that looked like the picture on the top right. This animal moved between these shelters and crossed that barren landscape 4 times within a week. As feral cats are known to preferentially hunt in recently burnt areas, the complex interactions of predation and fire are likely to influence the species' long-term survival in the Great Victoria Desert.
So we actually detected the sandhill dunnart in some recently burned habitat sheltering. Jeff's face says it all, I think. We were very surprised. This is pretty unusual behaviour, but it is an adaptation that we've been able to see because we've been monitoring for such a long time. So this was once out of 336 days, so not common, and his usual shelters were in long unburned habitat nearby. So this is good news from an adaptation perspective, but it's usually not like this, and we really don't know the full effects of habitat fragmentation and how sandhill dunnarts use the habitat after fire.
So there still is a lot of work to do, and we really are just at the beginning. But as we can see, the Southwest GVD supports a range of restricted plants and animals, and many of these species rely on long unburnt habitats, including species that live in tree hollows or structurally dense vegetation. And so the sandhill dunnart is a key umbrella species, and its conservation will help maintain the region's special flora and fauna. So in summary, sandhill dunnarts are rare and they can be hard to locate. They are known from densely vegetated parts of the southwestern GVD, where they shelter in long unburnt and fire-sensitive habitats.
They're highly mobile with large home ranges, and this mobility helps them survive in fragmented landscapes.
But several populations have been lost to fire and habitat loss is ongoing.
The interaction of fire and predation is a key issue, and the impact of climate change and the increased frequency of fire are concerns to study in the future.
Some possible management and research recommendations are the identification of key areas for conservation,
The management of predators and fires,
research into habitat fragmentation and connectivity, and also into the role of dingoes as feral mesopredator suppressors.
and while there are big challenges ahead, there's also science, technology, passionate people like yourselves, and big ideas on the side of the sandhill dunnart. Okay, massive thanks to everybody that came out and volunteered their time in the field, and also thanks to everybody for helping us out with the GMG survey and lending us cameras. Thanks to Bryn, Rose and Belinda for funding the project over the past 4 years. And thank you also to my supervisors, Matt and Gareth at Bristol.
And thanks to the guys at the WA Museum, Ron Johnston and Alex Baines, and also Mike Hislop from the WA Herbarium. And also thanks to the guys at the Parks and Wildlife Service.
Massive thanks to Sue, Glenn and Dave, who are the original sandhill dunnart pioneers. So thanks for helping us out and answering all our questions. And massive thanks to Catherine at the GBDBT and everyone that was out on the surveys last year.
Thanks very much for listening.
Here's our contact details if anybody wants to get in touch. And good luck with the rest of the workshop.
Good luck.